Hello and welcome to today's Dav Chat. My name is Davina. I'm your host of this brief broadcast about democracy issues. And today I'm noting that former Senator of Alabama, Doug Jones, and former prosecutor, has written a piece about why it's naive to think that Putin would stop at Ukraine if he's able to conquer that. If he succeeds there, he will move further afield. And there's a whole anti-democracy coalition because Russia is being aided by Iran and China in their efforts to conquer the nation of Ukraine. We have to look closely at who is in this anti-democracy coalition and interrogate their possible motives. Now, I've mentioned before that Russia is an exporter of petrochemicals, and they're often incentivized to overthrow Western democracy because of democracy's ability to respond to a crisis, such as the climate emergency. Now, if you know enough science to know that carbon dioxide has been emitted by industrial human activity over the last the last century, but particularly intensifying over the last decade or so, and that gas has the potent ability to trap a bit of extra warmth from the sun. So the sun's heat, the sun rays reach the earth and then are reflected back off. But when extra heat is trapped, so it's reflecting back off into space, but there's a bit more of a greenhouse layer of gas in the atmosphere, even an additional bit of heat trapped, in our atmosphere can trap heat, leading to an increase in temperature. And temperature records have been broken over the last few years to an increasing extent. Sensible people who aren't marinated in fossil fuel propaganda want to address that problem, want to be careful stewards not only of our own collective future, but that of subsequent generations, our children and their children. Just responsible people with a brain that can process scientific information. We want that. What does Russia, a net exporter of fossil fuels, wants? To be able to have that unimpeded market for fossil fuel consumption. They don't really need to overthrow democracy, but do you know what? If you're an autocratic government controlling a society, you need fear, you need intimidation, you need those other flourishing democracies to stop making you look bad by virtue of their pure existence. So does that make sense? If you're a sort of formerly communist authoritarian society, hi darling, you're looking for something, okay? Or you're a currently communist society. Let's see, who's currently communist? China moved more towards being free market capitalistic society, but the thing about communism is it's the left version of authoritarianism. And fascism is the right-wing version of authoritarianism. So in Russia, you have Vladimir Putin being a despot with performative elections, somebody who orchestrated the death of his significant political opponent, Alexander Navalny, someone who potentially staged terrorist activities, such as blowing up multiple apartment buildings in order to frame Chechens and say Russia needed a strong hand at the wheel to raise his own profile in an election that was to be held close to the time of those bombings. Let's look up the dates. We'll go apartment bombings in Russia and how close that was to the Russian election. Russian apartment bombings. Okay, so that was in 1999, and a number of historians and independent journalists have concluded the KGB was part of it. The handling of the crisis by Vladimir Putin, who was prime minister at the time, boosted his popularity greatly and helped him attain the presidency within a few months. So he was prime minister. I think Boris Yeltsin had appointed him to the position of prime minister. There we go. A suspicious device resembling those used in the bombings was found and defused in one apartment block on the 22nd of September. But on the 23rd of September, Vladimir Putin praised the vigilance of the inhabitants of that city of Razyan and ordered the air bombing of Grozny, which marked the beginning of the Second Chechen War. 3 FSB agents, so I guess that's sort of the FBI equivalent in Russia, who had planted the devices at Razyan, were arrested by the local police. And the next day, FSB Director Nikolai Patrushkev announced that the incident in Razyan had been an anti-terror drill, and the device there was only contained sugar, and he freed the FSB agents involved. So Vladimir Putin announced a war on the back of some terrorist activity in a Russian town. Oh no, various Russian towns. Hang on. Russian cities, Buyansk, Moscow, and Volgodonsk. Oh, well, Moscow's not a town, it's a city. Yes, okay, Russian cities, I'm going to leave the pronunciation. Volgodonsk, Moscow, and Buyansk. There we go. Look at somebody using a war to try and consolidate their political position. We had Trump hoping to start a war with Iran in the final days of his administration, his term in office in 2021. Let's look that up too, because General Milley disclosed to people that he tried to talk Trump out of that and was able to stop that from happening. But he's shared with us his knowledge that Trump was keen to initiate military activities in Iran that would have precipitated a war with that country. And now we have Trump ally Benjamin Netanyahu conducting the war in Gaza in such a way that it invites Middle East cooperation amongst nations that are hostile to Israel. I mean, that was the idea of the provocation of October the 7th terrorist attacks in Israel in the first place, attacking a stronger foe with the goal of consolidating opposition to the existence of Israel. And my compassion goes out to the people of Palestinian territories, Gaza and the West Bank, and anywhere there are Palestinians who would prefer to have a state and some kind of high degree of protection from other nations around the world. But yeah, and Israel has a crook for a prime minister. Is it president? Yeah, Prime Minister Netanyahu, the leader of the government of Israel, a right winger and a crook, someone similar to Trump who's been indicted multiple times for fraud and corruption, and seeks to avoid facing the consequences, facing the legal fallout of corrupt behavior, because the process of accountability started for him, but he managed to suspend and delay it by virtue of trying to change the functioning of the Supreme Court in Israel and other things. And Trump's keen to have, Netanyahu's keen to have Trump back in office. They're allies. Trump caters to Netanyahu politically. He moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem at significant cost, all whilst lying and pretending that it was being done very cheaply because he's such a great deal maker. So Bob's here. Hello, Bob. I did see your comments earlier. I'll take the time to respond. You noted that things are heating up in the Middle East and it doesn't sound good. Let's hope things cool down. Yes, always hoping. But I'm looking up General Milley's admissions. Okay. All right, so there was an article on July 15th, 2021, Mark Milley's fight to stop Trump from striking Iran. All right. Oh, and then there's a follow-up article on the New Yorker 2 years later, close to 2 years later, why Donald Trump was so mad at Mark Milley that he confessed. Let's see. What did he confess? That he confessed it was his own idea to attack Iran. And we'll look up this and I can share the headlines on my screen. Hello to anybody who's joined us at this stage, talking about Iran and Trump's interest in attacking Iran. And of course, now we're having to worry that Iran will attack Israel and precipitate mass conflict in the Middle East. Okay, so here we go. The headline here is different to what appeared on the internet. Maybe they changed it because there were swear words. Let's make it a bit bigger. Don't need the ad. All right. Mark Milley's fight to stop Trump from striking Iran inside the extraordinary final days conflict between the former president and his chairman of the Joint Chiefs of the military. In the months after the 2020 election, says the caption to this article, the subject of Iran was repeatedly raised in White House meetings with Trump and Mark Milley. And Mark Milley repeatedly argued against a strike. So the New Yorker is a bit more formal than Twitter. If this was being talked about on Twitter, they would be linking to quotes from Donald Trump when President Obama was in office, which said things like, oh, the polls are so bad for Obama, he's going to start a war with Iran, just wait and see, or just you watch, things like that. There's multiple receipts showing that Trump projected that idea to Obama, that he would respond to mitigate being low in the approval ratings in the polls by attacking Iran. That the way to gain support in America would be to lash out militarily at America's enemies or perceived enemies. So I'm not disagreeing that Iran is an enemy, is an adversary of the United States, but we don't pick military fights just to raise our approvals in the polls unless we're a sociopath. And that's why President Obama didn't live up to Trump's predictions and just start a war with Iran to boost his approval rating. But Trump, having made that projection whilst Obama was in office, tried to follow through after he lost the 2020 election and was trying to find a pretext to remain in office, was trying to find a way to increase public support for him remaining in office. So he had multiple prongs to that effort, fomenting an insurrection in a legal way by trying to come up with a legal pretext for overturning Biden's election win, in a violent way by inciting his followers to ransack the Capitol, intimidate lawmakers, and violate that part of the Constitution that says an election victory must be certified on the 6th of January. Trump hoped to disrupt that part of the Constitution, the constitutional mandate with regards to election procedure, to then have a pretext for activating a provision in the 12th Amendment that says, should no candidate attain a electoral college majority, then one delegate from each state in the House of Representatives shall choose the president, knowing that Republicans had 26 delegates if one delegate was chosen per state, relative to 24 delegates for the Democrats, and that would have given the Republicans a majority of delegates, 26 versus 24, to choose Donald Trump for a second term in office, which would have been illegitimate but had a veneer of constitutional concordance to cling to when people said, hang on, what is happening? And he would have had the support of at least some of the military. Definitely there's a lot of Trump foot soldiers in various armed forces and uniformed institutional sections of the American government. Are we calling the military part of the government? Kind of, because it's paid for by the government. Yeah. So, yes, let's have a look at some more of this article. Okay. For the past several months, Trump General Milley had been engaged in an alarmed effort to ensure that Trump did not embark on a military conflict with Iran as part of his quixotic campaign. Quixotic, how funny, how cute and quirky, to overturn the results of the 2020 election and remain in power. The chairman secretly feared that Trump would insist on launching a strike on Iranian interests that could set off a full-blown war. There were two nightmare scenarios, Milley told associates, for the period after the November 3rd election, which resulted in Trump's defeat, but not his concession. So one nightmare scenario that Milley was worried about was to use the military on the streets of America to prevent the legitimate peaceful transfer of power. The other was an external crisis involving Iran. It was not public at the time, but Milley believed that the nation had come close, very close, to conflict with the Islamic Republic. This dangerous post-election period, Milley said, was all because of Trump's Hitler-like embrace of the big lie that the election had been stolen from him. Milley feared it was Trump's Reichstag moment, in which, like Adolf Hitler in 1933, he would manufacture a crisis in order to swoop in and rescue the nation from it. To prevent such an outcome, Milley had, since late in 2020, been having morning phone meetings at 8 a.m. most days with the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in the hopes of getting the country safely through to Joe Biden's inauguration. The chairman, a burly four-star Army general who had been appointed to the post by Trump in 2019, referred to these meetings with his staff as land the plane calls, as in both engines are out, the landing gear is stuck, we're in an emergency situation, our job is to land this plane safely and to do a peaceful transfer of power on the 20th of January. Well, it's the 21st, but anyway, he said, he's quoted as saying 20th of January. Before the election, Milley had drafted a plan for how to handle the perilous period leading up to the inauguration. He outlined 4 goals. First, to make sure that the US didn't go unnecessarily to war overseas. Second, to make sure that US troops were not used on the streets of America against the American people for the purpose of keeping Trump in power. Third, to maintain the military's integrity. And lastly, to maintain his own integrity. So that is what saved the United States from Trump succeeding with his various prongs of his insurrection plan in 2020. The individual consciences of a variety of people, many of whom probably lean quite conservative in their individual identities. So Mike Pence's conscience telling him not to comply with Trump's insistence that he throw out Biden's win, or Donald Trump wouldn't be his friend anymore. If you don't do this thing for me, I won't be your friend anymore. Like a real elementary school framed appeal of I won't like you anymore, you won't be invited to my party, but much more serious at a federal government level of disassemble American democracy for me or I won't like you and I'll call you poopy head, but I'm trying to break free from an elementary analogy here because I still want to underline the seriousness of this. I guess comedy makes serious and distressing historical discussions more palatable. And this is history, even though it's recent history, and it's a history that it is critical to our understanding of the threats we face now as people toy with the idea of voting for a tyrant. Again, for attention, they want to be annoying. They misunderstand how democracies work within a two-party system, and they want to punish the people with power as if they're a parent, who denied them something they want, and now they just want to focus on the negatives and say, "Look, I'd rather live on the street than live with you, mum and dad, because you said I had to take out the garbage and you made me do chores that I didn't want to do, so I would rather run away from home." That's what it sounds like to me when people are saying that their response to their dissatisfaction with actions taken by the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, is that they want to not vote, or they want to vote for Trump instead, to punish Biden. They sound like children wanting to punish their parents for taking care of them in a way that doesn't meet with their satisfaction. And they're misframing it as abuse, and it's it's not abuse, it's a tantrum. Because a two-party system doesn't get overthrown by your failure to vote. If you don't vote for Biden in a two-party system, you are helping an autocrat find a way of legitimizing their own power grab. Because Trump uses various illegitimate ways to try and steal election results. He accepts help from foreign adversaries. He actively begs for help from foreign adversaries. He said, Russia, if you're listening, please find Hillary Clinton's emails. They hacked the DNC. They didn't hack Hillary Clinton, but Trump asked them to. And that's not a legitimate thing for a presidential candidate to do. It should have been emphasized much more in the media, but the media were bringing some false equivalency to the situation. The fact that Trump had a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of defrauded contractors, a lot of women claiming he'd sexually assaulted them. And they balanced out all those negative facts with falsely inflammatory conversations about Hillary Clinton, using a private email server for some personal emails, some of which gray area overlapped with her business as Secretary of State under former President Obama. And of course, President Obama's two-term presidency was a massive cognitive dissonance smack in the face to racist people who cannot accept that there is no actual hierarchy of worth in which white people are superior. There's Black excellence and it's real. All right. So I will have to go soon. Bob's asked if I saw Lawrence O'Donnell troll Trump on his show. I did see the clip in which he put up a picture of Donald Trump looking extremely artificially orange, except for his ears. And he said those 77-year-old pink ears reveal the artifice. The artifice of Trump's makeup is highlighted by the fact he doesn't put makeup on his ears, and he cannot look in the mirror and see how obvious this is and how ridiculous it looks. And the jury will be confronted by a wordless Donald Trump every day, and all of the implications of his face, that he lies to himself about himself, that he thinks those lies will be swallowed by the public. I mean, of course, the irony of watching Lawrence O'Donnell say that is that a lot of about 30% of the public at least buy Donald's appearance as somehow admirable or at least acceptable. And it's certainly acceptable to all of those in an anti-democratic coalition that don't want a functional democracy that best serves the interest of the public. They prefer an oligarchy-style perversion of democracy that has performative elections, but ultimately is corrupted by significant bribe-style payments from wealthy people to officials, that allows for their interests to be catered to at the expense of the general public. So bribes paid, or donations, exorbitant political donations / bribes paid to elected officials who then roll back regulations to protect air and water, to protect our collective air and water, and instead introduce pollutants that are carcinogenic, cause birth defects, neurological deficiencies, all types of problems with people who are exposed, and they just gamble that they themselves will be safe from those problems. They themselves will be able to avoid or escape the worst outcomes of climate temperature and climate destabilization. And wealthy people who would rather lean into delusions of theocratic grandeur, and that is to say, imposing their religious convictions on others, and indulging the very human but not very admirable tendency to want to judge everybody else's decisions as being poorly made, but one's own decisions as being made with extenuating circumstances. In other words, saying the people who get abortions are wicked, but if my wife or if myself needed an abortion, then it would be, that would clearly be because it was medically necessary or circumstantially necessary. My medical treatment is necessary. Their medical treatment is debatably necessary. Their need to access reliable medical care that's not where bills aren't issued post-treatment in an unpredictable and sometimes wildly inflated sort of way, where schools have wildly differing quality because they're funded by property taxes. So it depends on how wealthy you are or what kind of wealthy area you live in as to the how well paid and how well funded your local public school is. I mean, that's not the idea of public school. It's to provide a little bit of a level playing field, a little bit of leveled up excellence for the children of a nation. That's called having pride in your nation and saying we give our children the best chance to succeed, knowing that it will benefit not only themselves, but our nation collectively, to have well-educated, well-informed citizens. And of course, people who assemble under an autocratic umbrella of autocratic coalition of bossy religious extremists who want to impose their self-serving religious convictions on you. And remember, it doesn't apply to them. They don't change their own conduct according to their religious convictions necessarily. They just want to be able to apply punishment to you for failing their religious convictions. Bob says, I'm laughing, the RNC is broke. That is fun. Lara Trump's been installed as the head of the RNC, and she's, of course, funneling a lot of that money that's been raised by GOP donors to pay Donald Trump's lawyers in his 4 different criminal cases, as well as various civil lawsuits that he's lost, civil cases that he's lost and has to pay significant penalties for. Even if he's currently appealing them, he has to try and find collateral to back bonds that he puts up. Anyway, I've got to go, but it's been lovely chatting to you all. Hope to do so again soon. I love to read bits from relevant newspaper articles and discuss current events in a context of identifying and solving the threats to democracy and supporting and uplifting democracy and functional government that's for the people, by the people, and for the future people. See you later. Monday will be fun. Monday, 15th of April, Donald Trump's first criminal trial begins. The case of Trump falsifying business documents to conceal secret payments to his then lawyer, Michael Cohen, to repay Michael Cohen for paying Stephanie Clifford's, aka Stormy Daniels, a porn star who allegedly had a sexual encounter with Donald Trump in which she hoped to gain an appearance on The Apprentice, and he hoped to, well, you know, take care, everybody. Talk soon. Bye.